Hey guys, Devin here with Admiral Off-Road, and today we're going to be changing the transmission fluid and filter. Let's get started. The first thing you're going to need to do is locate the transmission pan. This is going to be located just in front of the cross member. Not all transmissions come with a drain plug. If yours does though, that's going to make the process a lot cleaner and easier. Just simply remove the drain plug, have a catch pan underneath, and drain all the fluid before you drop the pan. If you don't have a drain plug, you can still pull the pan. It's just going to be a lot messier because you don't have a way to drain all the fluid before you start to remove the pan, and it's all going to spill out the sides. With all the fluid drained, we can move on to removing all of the bolts that hold the transmission pan to the transmission. In the case of the AW4 transmission on the Jeep Cherokee, it's going to be 19 10mm bolts. Now that we've removed all the bolts, we can pry the transmission pan from the transmission. Be sure when you do this that you have a catch pan underneath, because there'll still be some fluid left in the transmission pan that's going to leak when you try to remove it. In order to completely remove the transmission pan, you'll have to disconnect the two-piece transmission dipstick tube that's located at the front passenger side of the pan. Now that we've got the transmission pan removed from the transmission, we can remove all of the old gasket and the RTV, as well as clean out the inside of the pan and the two magnets that sit at the bottom. You're going to want to give those magnets a good cleaning. They're probably going to be covered in little tiny metal pieces. As long as there's no big chunks in there, you should be fine. It should be very, very fine metal shavings. It should almost feel like mud. There are a few ways you can go about removing the old gasket and RTV from the transmission pan. I decided to go with a scraper, and that worked just fine for me. We're back underneath the transmission now, and with the pan removed, we can get to the filter. The filter is held in with a couple of bolts, and just like when we remove the pan, we're going to want to put a catch pan underneath it. There's still going to be some fluid in the filter, and when we remove it, most of that is going to leak out. With the old filter removed, we can put the new filter in its place. Make sure you install it the same way you took the old filter out. I'm going to install the bolts first, just finger tight to get it all in place, and then I'll go back over it with a ratchet to tighten it all down. With the new filter installed, it's almost time to reinstall the transmission pan. I used a little bit of RTV to help hold the brand new gasket in place, and I also put a couple of the old bolts up through the holes. This is going to help line everything up and also keep the gasket in place when we go to reinstall the transmission pan. Before you go to reinstall the transmission pan, make sure all the bolt holes line up with the holes in the gasket. The holes will only line up one way. When installing the transmission pan, make sure that all the bolt holes as well as both parts of the two-piece transmission dipstick tube line up. It'll help to loosely install the 4 bolts at the corners of the transmission pan first, and then go back to tighten them down once you install all of the rest of the bolts. Leaving the 4 bolts at the corners loose will allow the transmission pan to shift back and forth as needed to line up all the bolts in the holes. The next step is to install and tighten down the rest of the transmission pan bolts. If you're working with an AW4 transmission like I am, you don't have to tighten them down very much. The torque spec is only 5.5 foot-pounds. We're almost ready to refill the fluid, but first make sure you reinstall and tighten down the drain plug. There are a lot of automatic transmission fluids out there. Make sure you use the right one for your transmission. With the vehicle running and at its operating temperature, check the transmission fluid and add fluid as needed. Again, you should check the transmission fluid when the transmission is hot, so I added a couple quarts of fluid, drove it around the block a couple times, and then checked it. I was a little bit short, so I decided I had to add a little bit more.
Alright guys, that's going to do it for today. Now, with this method, we're not quite going to get all of the old transmission fluid out. There's still going to be some left in the torque converter and some other places that it just doesn't drain when you drop the pan. But the good news is, all you're going to have to do is probably run your Jeep for about a week or so, and then come back and change it again. You don't have to drop the transmission pan or anything like that. You don't have to change the filter. If you have a drain plug like I do, all you got to do is pull the drain plug, put it back in and fill it again, kind of like an oil change. So it's super easy from here on out. You're probably going to have to do this about 2 or 3 times to get completely clean, brand new transmission fluid. But once again, that's super easy. This was the hard part. If you want to know how to change your transfer case fluid, go ahead and click over here. And if you want to know how to add a transmission cooler, click over here. If you like what you saw here, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.